and Entertainment Network. I'm your host and producer this afternoon, Logan Landers. And join me, as always, my best friend, Jay McClellan. What's up, Jay?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. Glad to have my good friend, Philly sports guy, Pags, on the show today.
Oh, and of course, as you just mentioned, Jay, our special guest today, our special interview here on the show, Pags, a.k.a. the Philly sports guy. What's going on, man? It's been quite some time since we had you on the program. How you been?
I've been great, guys. Thank you for having me back.
Awesome,
I didn't know
man.
if I was going to make it back. The last time I was on here, I had to beat up McLovin a number of different times. And I saw, like, on your preview there, you had to show when the Phillies gave up that home run to Houston in the World Series. I was right there. If you stop it in the middle of there, you could see me in center field. So
I'm
trust me,
going to have to rewatch that. I haven't noticed that. Yeah, I'll have to watch that after the show's over.
You'd have to slow it down.
I was there. I saw it when the show was being aired. I said, I think Frankie was the one that he called me first. And yeah, Philly sports guy's out there in the center field. I'm like, yeah, I know. I just saw him.
Well, sounds good, man. Well, hey, let's get right into it, man. Obviously, we know the NFL regular season just capped off. So give the fans at home, give your thoughts. Obviously, this is going to be all things Philadelphia for the most part. We're going to talk a lot about the Eagles, a lot about just the NFL in general. So how did you feel in the regular season Philadelphia did in this 2023 season so far?
Well, obviously they came out the gates smoking hot. Like they, got to a 10-1 record. Obviously that the Jets game was a little bit of a funny game. Being in that time frame, I was brought up, like I was in the Phillies and then the Eagles back and forth. So I got to imagine, I know exactly how exhausted I was. I know that they were watching the Phillies games as well. So I kind of felt like the Jets game was a little bit of hangover game just because they were tired from watching the playoffs and such. So that might have been a game that we probably could have won had we not had the Phillies in the playoffs. That being said, once we got past that 10-1, once we got past the Bills, it started to really, I think that time caught up with us. I mean, we go up against the 49ers. It's our third game in 13 days. And the 49ers were just, they were doing what they do. I mean, they're a great team, and they were going off a 10 days rest because they had just come off of Thanksgiving, and we were, like I said, our third game in 13 days. So the schedule makers weren't the best with us, and we just got beat. I mean, we just got really smacked, in the mouth a little bit. And you could tell because we were moving at 80% and they were moving at 100%. And those types of collisions never work out well for the team that's moving at 80%. And then I think because of that, the next game that we had, we were still a little bit beat up and banged up, and we wound up losing that game as well. I think that was the Cowboys game. And then, to follow behind with the Seahawks, where we probably could have won that game, but didn't. Like I said, we made Drew Lock look like that he was Joe Montana for that last drive. And ultimately, then we beat the Giants, which helps us get out of that losing streak. But then really lose one to Arizona, which was, I think, something that really hurt. And then I think that they rested really this past Sunday against the Giants. They didn't really care about this game. They wanted to move on and get ready for the playoffs.
Well said, Jay McClellan. Go ahead, but first, let me introduce our main stack guy, of course, Dustin Reese. Hop on the program. What's going on, Dustin?
Not much, guys. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing good as always. Glad to have you on the program. All right, Jay McClellan, go ahead and talk some shop with your NFC East foe.
Yeah, here's my thing. In Pags, we've talked about this a little bit, and I even know on the Mac and Jack show, they've talked about it a few times. And even on a couple other podcasts I've heard have mentioned it. It seems like the ones that win the Super Bowl aren't necessarily always the ones that are the best. It's the ones that are riding that hot wave, riding that momentum wave, and everything's just clicking. Those seem to be the ones that walk away with the trophy. Now, you guys, like you said, you came out smoking hot. You've gone through some periods, 2 periods at least, where I know you've had, consecutive downtimes, right? You've got like a couple of skids there. You guys really aren't coming into the playoffs riding that momentum heat wave, but on paper and at the beginning, if you look at the beginning of the season, you guys are talented. You are one of the better talented teams in the league. But does it concern you, and I know we've talked about where there were some fractures in the locker room, You know, whether it be Jalen Hurts not being the leader, quote unquote, or if it was on the defensive side, what have you. It just seems like there are still some issues in that locker room. Had they been mended, maybe so. But are you concerned coming into this playoff series? Now, granted, you are getting a slight easier team to play, which is good for you guys, I think, to really find your momentum again against Tampa. I fully expect you to beat Tampa. I guess it's twofold. One, are you glad that you're playing Tampa so you can re-get that momentum back in your favor? And two, are you concerned coming into the playoffs with that lack of momentum behind you?
I think when you do that, when you come in like limping in like we have, there's always a little bit of concern. And you can't just take anybody for granted. Obviously, Tampa Bay did make it into the playoffs, and we're all have the same record now. So we all start at 0-0. So you can't just assume that we're going to beat Tampa. You got to go out and actually make it happen. And right now, the defense is a little bit sketch. I feel that our offense play calling has been a little erratic or maybe even too predictable, to say the least. And I think that that's kind of shown through a little bit. The truth of the matter is that I felt that once we had the fifth seed secured, or whether it was going to be the second seed or the fifth seed, my expectation was that the fifth seed was actually a better seed, even though you're not having the home games. You are going up against like Tampa Bay, which is light. And then if everybody holds serve, assuming that Dallas and Detroit both win, that the 49ers are now going to be on 3 weeks rest, which is, obviously they're getting a lot of rest, but with rest comes rust. And when I go back to the 49ers game and that first quarter, we really played one of the best quarters of football during that time. We held the 49ers to -6 yards offense, and we were able to walk down the field both times, but we were only able to come up with 3 points each of those drives. Had those drives ended in touchdowns, that game would have looked a tremendous amount different. And I kind of feel it's the same way here. If we were able to take those first 2 drives and take it to San Francisco and make it 14 points rather than 6 points or even 10 points, you're going to have a Brock Purdy who is back in the playoffs again, but remembers what happened last year and could get nervous and could be more erratic. And that team could get scared and not do their game plan. And again, it's a little bit of wishful thinking. I think the 49ers are a great team and right now are better suited to move on towards the Super Bowl than the Eagles are. But the Eagles have been there, and their veteran leadership, I think, could come through to really be able to show, hey, listen, we do belong here, and we're ready to do what we need to do to make sure we make it to the Super Bowl.
All right, well said. And Dustin, before I kick it over to you, I got to introduce our guy. Currently, Frankie the Yankee, our boy Frankie C. Frankie, how you been, man? Hope you had some good holidays, and we're glad to have you back on the program.
Yeah, I've been good, man. Right now, I'm not feeling real high. I'm sick as hell.
Oh, well, we hope you got some chicken noodle soup on standby, and you get to feeling better soon. Nice hot blanket, some cocoa, the whole 9 yards for you, buddy. So hope you feel better. But I know we're feeling good now. We got Philly Sports Guy on, and Dustin, I know you got loads of questions for our guest. So go ahead and ask away, my friend.
Yeah, you see this kind of all the time when it comes to young coaches that have a lot of success early on, like Nick Sirianni. And a lot of times you can hear that argument saying that a coach is only as good as his assistant coaches are. And yes, I think the Eagles have struggled to do a lot of things that they did well last season. But I want your opinion on this. Do you think some of the Eagles' struggles also have to do with not having Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen on that staff anymore?
Absolutely. I feel that Steichen specifically was really the engine, or was able to run the engine or drive the engine really well last year. And it equated to obviously a head coaching job. Not only that, but his team almost making the playoffs. So he did a great job over there in Indianapolis, and he was really missed this year. I feel that Brian Johnson isn't as as bad as it's looked lately, I feel like that some of this blame may go to Jalen Hurts, who has regressed a little bit this year from last year. I think that he is changing some of the play calling, and that may be why it looks so predictable and ho hum and just the same thing over and over again. Because it's hard to determine whether it's Jalen Hurts making the read and that's what the play is, or what the play went in as originally, and that Brian Johnson is actually calling a bad game. So it's hard to determine where that all really lies. My thought is that they're going to go back to what works when they get into the playoffs now. I think when you go to Tampa, you're going to do what really works, and we still are able to run the ball better, I feel, than any team out there. We just haven't done it. So, but it's the playoffs now, and you got to win any way that you can. And running the ball and keeping our defense off the field, especially for this first game. I'd love to see us have 38 minutes of possession time. So our defense is well rested going into a 6-day week, because we're playing on Monday to Sunday at either the 49ers or Dallas or even, I guess even Detroit.
All right, well said. And Frankie, if you have a question, go ahead, and then we'll switch over just to more general topics about the playoffs and what to expect. So if you have any specific questions about the Eagles or anything Philly sports related, obviously, go ahead and get it off your chest.
Yeah, well, you guys all know that my season was over by like week 4, so I'm not going to go on a NFL question for Philly sports guy, because I totally have confidence in Jalen Hurts and the Eagles going as far as they can. I like that team. I like what they're doing. No matter how banged up they are, I feel like they're going to, this little rest for the Philadelphia Eagles is what they really truly need. Like Pag said a little while ago, these guys were playing like 3 games in 13 days. That's tough. So of course they're gonna get hurt and stuff like that. But now you got a little rest, and you play the Tampa Bay Bucks. So I have confidence in you guys making it at least to the NFC Championship game again. But what I really want to ask you, what direction do you think the Philadelphia Phillies are gonna go? Because I haven't seen any news on signings for the Phillies or anything like that.
Against Tampa.
The hardest part about the Phillies right now, I mean, you're asking a question where it's like, it's all right. I haven't even gotten into baseball. I know that they went really hardcore on that Japanese pitcher. And of course, he went to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers spent over $1 billion this offseason just to come out and find out that they're going to lose in the first round again next year. So that's kind of what the Dodgers like to do. They like to spend money and then lose in the playoffs. So I don't know. I think that they are holding serve a little bit. I think they want to see what plays out here, if there's going to be any pitchers that come in, into camp, or somebody may want to trade. I am really interested in maybe talking to Pittsburgh about Bednar. I really like him as a closer, and I know that they have had some interest in him, and I think that they're waiting for the season to kind of begin to see how things really shake out and see who they have. I know Andrew Painter coming up is going to be, once he gets back off of the injury, I think he's going to be really good to go and really help bolster this lineup in terms of our starting 5. Bringing Nola back, he's an inning eater. You know what I mean? So obviously, I don't think he's the number 1 that he used to be. But having Wheeler, I think Wheeler's still got plenty in the tank. Nola doesn't get hurt. Like I said, he eats up innings every year. So, and the bats, I think the bats are going to be a little bit more comfortable this year. We're not going to have Rhys Hoskins in the background kind of saying, hey, yeah, I really want to try to get into play and stuff like that. I feel like that may have acted as a little bit of a distraction to the team. But I think that I still think that right now they're still, on paper, probably the second or third best team in the National League, and still expect them to get to the NLCS and maybe the World Series.
All right. So let's go ahead and talk about just some generalized NFL postseason action. As we know, kicking off very short. Let's just do a quick breakdown by breakdown game by game, just quick thoughts and who we think will be advancing, and then ultimately who we think will get to the Super Bowl. So let's just go ahead and start off wild card games. Obviously, you got the Pittsburgh Steelers once again, that Mike Tomlin effect, finishing them above 500, getting them into the playoffs. They'll be taking on the Buffalo Bills. What do you think about that matchup? Who do you think have the advantage going on to the divisional round?
Yeah, Tomlin, I know that he's gone 17 years above 500, but he has not won a playoff game since 2016. And that's a long time. And I don't think it's going to happen this year. I know that he has considered moving on to do broadcasting. I think that maybe things have become a little stagnant. He's used to the winning, but without TJ Watt on that defense, I think they're going to be really struggling to be able to get off of the field and stop Buffalo's drives, and that's going to be the biggest component. I think it was last year that they played them, and it was a blowout. It was like 38-3. I kind of look at it something very similar in this game. I kind of feel that Buffalo is just going to roll right over them and make Tomlin. You're going to start to see Tomlin in the booth somewhere or talking about these games on one of the broadcasts.
A game I'm looking forward to, I think it's going to be really good. And, of course, guys, you can chime in whenever you want to. Dolphins and Chiefs, that on paper seems to be one of the better games in opening week in terms of the playoffs. I'm really thinking that one's going to be really good, and we're going to see a good team move on and one fall. Pags, who do you think is going to be moving on? Will the Dolphins maybe get the slight upset, you could say, and knock off the Chiefs?
I think this is a bad draw for the Dolphins. We checked out the weather, and it's going to be -9 degrees at game time.
Yeah,
and
it's supposed to be the coldest game ever played at Arrowhead Stadium. And when you look at the Dolphins roster, only 2 players on that roster have ever played a game below 0.
There you go. That's from the stat guy. So then you know that it's
and one of them is not Tyreek Hill.
Yeah,
which is important.
I believe that just they're not really going to be able to handle it. I think that this works out really well for the Chiefs. Like I said, it was a good pull for them. I think they would have had a much harder time with either Pittsburgh or Buffalo. However, they do have an okay defense over there, and it would be the defense that really would win the game for the Dolphins. I don't believe that they're going to have enough on offense. I know that obviously Tyreek Hill is a little beat up. I know Waddle just got off of injury. Mostert's out, and I think that he's really the guy who's the better running back of the two of them. So I kind of feel that as long as there's not turnovers, and when the ball's that cold and when its field's that cold, that's the problem. The turnovers can become plentiful. People start dropping the ball and they start fumbling, or they throw interceptions because it's a little slick. And as long as the Chiefs offense doesn't lose the game, I think that they should come out ahead, and not in a very low scoring game, because it is cold. When it's that cold, nobody wants to get hit.
That's true. And I think Pags would appreciate this, and we've talked about this. And I'll tell you, as long as the Miami Dolphins have a heaping helping dose of Vaseline, it's going to be all right.
Nah, it's at the Icy Hot. It's the Icy Hot.
Icy Hot.
The Icy
Yeah,
Hot.
or the Icy Hot. I just feel like it would be
Yeah,
easier for them to operate with the Vaseline than the Icy Hot. Icy Hot is a very harsh thing, and I don't know if you can concentrate when you got a burning sensation in your armpits. I just don't know.
Well, you don't put it all the way up to your armpits, but you put it on your arms. Anything when you're the skin out in the outdoors. So if you're wearing like Under Armour on, you're not going to put on any of that stuff, because that's what's supposed to try to keep you warm a little bit. But ultimately, Vaseline does help in the cold. Like I said, Icy Hot. I wouldn't be surprised that you have Icy Hot on a lot of that sideline, on both sidelines, because like I said, at 9 degrees, hey, these offensive linemen, they got to look like they're burly men.
They got to look tough.
One of the things that worries me about Miami, though, on a serious note, is, oftentimes when you play in that cold weather really does lead to a lot of injury, because you're not performing like you normally would. You may be a little bit more tense than you normally. You're not relaxed, And when you take a guy like Tua, who, let's be honest, is injury prone as they come, I wonder if it's going to affect him and if he possibly is going to have to deal with any kind of injuries due to cold weather play.
It's interesting. When talking to players, actual players who played the game at one point or another, when you play in cold, there's a lot of guys that what they do is called tipping. They're tiptoeing around because they don't want to get hit. And that actually changes your game. It's the reason why Miles Sanders did not stay in Philadelphia. That Chicago game last year in the cold kind of cemented him not being here anymore because ultimately he was tiptoeing around, didn't like to get hit in the cold, and ultimately, if you can't play in the cold, you can't play in Philly because when it matters, it's cold outside. So
that's a good way to put it.
And then ultimately, I kind of feel that that's the same way with them. Like Tua is Hawaiian, so I mean, there is cold spots in Hawaii, but
it ain't that cold.
I think that he could have that same problem. He could have that same issue.
Okay, so Dustin, I know you've been riding high on the Browns here lately.
Yep.
Give your thoughts about the Browns and Texans, and also if you got any questions for Pags about that matchup. And I guess just your general consensus about how well you think they're going to do this playoff season.
Like I said the last couple of weeks, Cleveland is my pick to go to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. They've had a Super Bowl caliber defense all season. But the one thing that they're finally getting now is, say what you want about Joe Flacco, but this offense has played at a completely different level since Joe Flacco has taken over. They're averaging almost 130 yards more per game. They're scoring 8.5 points more per game with Joe Flacco. They're finally stretching the field and getting David Njoku and guys like Amari Cooper more involved since Joe Flacco got there. And Joe Flacco's going on the road in the playoffs. The only Super Bowl ring Joe Flacco has was on the road as the 5 seed in the playoffs with the Baltimore Ravens. He's also 13-4 in his career in the playoffs going on the road. This is nothing new for Joe Flacco. If they beat Houston, he goes to Baltimore for that divisional round, and Cleveland already has a win against Baltimore this year. They're not going to be afraid to play Baltimore. Joe Flacco's not going to be afraid to play Baltimore, and I just like the way Cleveland's playing. I've liked the way they've been playing for a while, especially since Joe Flacco, and given his playoff experience, I trust him in a big game over Lamar Jackson.
Thanks, your thoughts?
You said Pags?
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Pags?
Oh, got you. I agree. I think that Cleveland has got a great defense, a Super Bowl caliber defense. However, I think that Houston is going to be it was a rough draw for them. I think that Houston, like if they went to Jacksonville, I all Cleveland. If they went to Indianapolis, all Cleveland. Now, I know Cleveland beat Houston recently. I think it was Christmas Eve this year.
Yeah.
But I think that they're going to be a lot more prepared. The one thing that I have learned about DeMeco Ryans is that he is able to make the adjustments necessary to be able to win games. And I feel that he's going to make a lot of adjustments to be able to make that occur. And, I think it's going to be a very close game. It's going to be a tough fought battle. And I have it Houston coming out a little bit ahead against the Browns.
I mean, I think that's going to be kind of an underrated matchup there. Two teams. No, who would have thought the Texans would have been in the playoffs?
Right.
This quick. I mean, it's definitely a team to watch out for. And the Browns, I mean, we all thought their season was done for. Once, obviously Deshaun Watson went down, Nick Chubb went down, lost a lot of their offensive firepower. But as you mentioned, that defense has proven to be elite. And that's really what's helped guided them. The reemergence, you could say, of Joe Flacco, the skilled veteran helping them out. And it's going to be a good matchup. But, Frankie, I want to kick it over to you. And I know this topic is not for your teams, but something could be done here that hasn't been done since we've been born. And that's the Lions winning a playoff game in a bittersweet way. The Lions and the Rams, Matt Stafford has a chance to potentially knock out his old team, I should say.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is truly the one game that was keeping my eye. I was hoping that nobody brought up that game. That right there, I feel like is the biggest game of Wild Card Weekend, where you have Matthew Stafford going back to Detroit to face the Detroit Lions, and then you got also Jared Goff who's facing the team that traded him away from Matthew Stafford, so he gets a little redemption to knock out the Rams in a Lions uniform. I feel like that game right there is going to be a highlight. It's sad that I think it's a Sunday night game if I'm not mistaken. They definitely put it on a primetime channel and time slot as well. That's gonna be an amazing game. Hutchinson and the defense, the Lions, what they've done all season, they've done something that we've never witnessed, and that's win over 10 games. And then you also got the Rams, who kind of looked like they weren't going to make the playoffs. They had a little bit of a hiccup, but they ended up fighting their ways at the end of the season. They got in there, just slightly got in there. But I feel like this is going to be a great matchup between Matthew Stafford with the Rams against Jared Goff and the Lions.
Yeah, so Pax, what's your thoughts on the matchup of Matthew Stafford having a Cinderella story in a way, potentially having to knock out his old team?
I look at it the other way. I think that Jared Goff is going to be the one that gets to knock off his old team, and I'm not as excited. I feel like that if there was any team that could possibly be upset in this first round, it could be Detroit. But I just don't buy it. I just like the fire from the coach. I think that the Detroit is going to be, listen, there's no Rams fans out there. So every Detroit fan who has been waiting for this forever is going to be in attendance. And I know that they've got a lot of passion up there. I know a lot of the super fans. I know every one of them is going to be at that game. And I kind of think that you're going to see Detroit come out swinging, and they're going to get up a number of points to start. And I think the Rams are going to be playing catch up and ultimately not be able to by the end of the game.
All right. And Jay McLovin, you got the final game on the docket. So I guess plead your case and let Philly Sports Guy know why the Dallas Cowboys should get the win in their playoff matchup.
Yeah, if this was the one thing I like about this is we're not coming in cold, right? I mean, we're coming off of a game with the Commanders, and I'm not saying by any stretch of the mean that the Commanders are the best team in the world, but we're still playing, we're still working, we're still keeping things in sync, we're still out there putting the pads on, taking the hits. So we're not coming in cold. A lot of times when the Cowboys have come in cold, where they've had the bye week and they've had to play after the wild card, we look terrible. We're out of sync. We're not playing right. This year, we came off. We got good momentum coming into this game. We're relatively healthy for the most part. Michael Parsons kind of still got me a little nervous because he's got that issue with his hand. He saw it was pretty heavily taped during the last game. But we avoided all the injuries coming into this, so I'm glad about that as well. Pollard it should be fairly fresh coming in. We don't have that thunder like we had last go around, so this is going to be a whole lot of lightning on the run game. But I like it, man. I like it. We're at home. We're undefeated. We've showed that we can get beat down by Seattle and still come back and win the game. So this team shows they have a lot of fight. One of the things I like specifically, which is where we've always hurt, and everybody knows it, is that Dak Prescott is turnover prone. But he has not been as turnover prone this season as he has in previous seasons. So the emergence of Dak getting better, the mercy of Mike McCarthy actually calling the play, not Bill McKellen, Winslow like we had last year and things of that nature. We've made some upgrades. Now, how far do we go? Who knows? I do think that we're a little bit better than the Packers. I think in terms of it's being a home field game, I think our running game is a little bit better. They're going to say A.J. Dillon is good and Aaron Jones, but Aaron Jones has come off an injury, so not that he's playing bad, but ultimately I see the Cowboys taking this. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be huge, and I think Ferguson is going to be huge at tight end. And I think that they're going to get the game going on the run side, and I think defensively, Michael Parsons and company got a lot to prove.
All right. Philly Sports Guy, your thoughts on your NFC rivals if they can get the win against the Packers this upcoming week?
Okay.
Well, I feel like they should get the win. However, the Packers are a scrappy team. They're the youngest team in the NFL. They were not supposed to be here. They were not supposed to make the playoffs. This was supposedly a rebuilding year. They are healthy now. They're playing good football. And for some reason or another, they happen to have Dallas Cowboys numbers when it comes to the playoffs. Now, does that mean that they're guaranteed to win? No, it doesn't. But I think Dallas is going to have all they can handle plus. and it's going to be a much closer game. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes down to whoever has the ball last being the winner. You're right. I think Micah Parsons being a little bit with that clubbed hand, I don't think that's going to really be a matter of things. He might not be able to wrap up with that one hand, but he's still going to be able to disrupt everything. Yeah, having his hand wrapped ain't going to stop his legs from moving, and that speed is going to be a really big deal in there. And if I was the Packers, I'd have to run directly at him. Like, you want to get around him as quickly as possible because he likes to over pursue. And you can gain some yards going right at him sometimes. And as long as you can make sure to, get by him as you're running around, that I think that you would be able to get some yardage. Like I said, I think the defense is a little bit sketch. You can gain some yards on the Cowboys. You just got to be able to finish those drives up. If the Packers are scoring touchdowns and not field goals, there's a good chance they could upset them. However, I think the Cowboys are going to be able to do it.
All right,
you're being way too nice for Jay. That was just way too nice.
I know. I got to beat him up. I got to beat him up all day long. But
fine.
You know what? I wanted to go back real quick to that Cleveland game. Cleveland game. I know that you're not supposed to take the playoffs into consideration, but I kind of feel something like the winner of that game, that coach is going to be the coach of the year.
Oh, not a bad. Yeah, that's not a bad suggestion.
I mean, what Stefanski's done with Watson going down and bringing in old man Flacco and the Rhea Burgess of Flacco out there is incredible. And of course, what D'Amico has done with the Texans. I'll tell you what, there's not a whole lot. I remember when the Texans had their inaugural event that, hey, we're the Houston Texans. We're gonna in the draft and everything. And Hal Lanier said, yeah, we're gonna take it slow. We're gonna be methodical. We're gonna be this. We're gonna be that. We're not gonna make these bad decisions. And then, of course, you know how all of that transpired. And I tell you what, the one thing that they've done right is bringing in D'Amico Ryans to really get that team back under control, solidify it, give stability, give the good decision-making. And that's what this team needed. And I'm glad that they got D'Amico.
They got a Houston guy and brought him back home.
That's it.
He had his best years of his career was in Houston. I know he played for the Eagles for a minute, but his best years were in Houston. They brought him back home. He's a fiery guy. He was able to change the culture in 1 year's time, and here he is in the playoffs now. And it would be a little bit of an upset here. I mean, I know that it's not, the points don't really say it because I know I'm still sketchy on whether Cleveland's going to be able to score points, but. Like I said, I kind of feel that the winner of this game will wind up being the coach of the year.
All right. And Philly Sports Guy, my final question to you, who do you have in the Super Bowl? Which two teams are going to be representing the AFC and the NFC? Who's you got going down in February?
Right now, I still have the Ravens and the Niners. I just can't see. I just can't foresee anything else. I'd love to say, I would have thought that Jacksonville might have made a funny play, and it's really hard to bet against the Chiefs until they're beaten. And maybe Buffalo can stand a chance, but I feel like any team that's got to go into Baltimore is going to wind up losing this year. And I think that just it's as scary as it sounds. I think the Harbaugh family are going to own the championships of football this year.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that concept. The stories write themselves right there. But yeah, no, I could definitely see that happening. Philly Sports Guy, as always, we appreciate you coming on the show. Let the fans at home know where they can catch you, your social media channels, and anything else you'd like to promote. Now is the time to do so.
Hey, so all you got to do, just Google The Philly Sports Guy, and you'll find me everywhere. I am on every social media one there is, big and small. You'll be able to find me, and if not, just Google that face painted guy, and I'll show up most of the time in the first two.
All right, well, you guys heard it here first. As always, Philly Sports Guy, we always appreciate you taking the time out of your day, coming on the show, talking some sports with us, talking some Philly sports to be exact. Always a pleasure, my friend. As always, Jay McLovin, Dustin Reese at the Step Out, and Frankie the Yankee. Always fun time, my friends. Hey, guys, enjoy the rest of your nights, and we'll talk to y'all again on another live episode. We'll see you soon.